Creativity: How Our Messy Minds Can Both Create and Deceive. Written by Carla Weyers. Narrated by Tyla Shandro. Chapter 1. What is creative skill? An act of creativeness can be nice and motivating, such as creating a stunning painting or developing an innovative new product. However, an idea doesn't need to be artistic or world-changing to count as creative. Life needs everyday acts of ingenuity and novel workarounds. In this sense, almost everybody has some amount of creativity. Studies indicate that creativity involves making new connections between different areas of the brain, which is achieved by cultivating divergent thinking abilities and deliberately uncovering oneself to new experiences and to learning. While research psychologists are interested in tapping innovative thinking, clinical psychologists sometimes encourage clients to use artistic expression as a way to face hard feelings. It is in everyone's interest to nurture creative impulses, regardless of an individual's day job. How can a person go about shaking up the way they think? Creative skill is connected with many elements, consisting of conducive environments, ideal partners, personality traits, spirituality, and just a hint of serendipity. Finding the right mix of these is not always easy, but the results are well worth it. How to be more creative. Most people feel that they have no or extremely limited creative capability, even some who work in creative fields. And it's true that certain individuals are more creative than others. Luckily, though, creativity can be obtained and refined at any age or experience level. Innovation isn't some magnificent gift. It is actually the proficient application of knowledge in new and interesting ways. It needs altering an individual's regular routine, stepping outside of normal comfort zones, and taking notice of the present moment. When learning new information, taking a break, either by sleeping or just enjoying a diversion, is another way of allowing the unconscious mind to process the information in novel and unexpected ways. That usually prepares for an innovative insight or development. Does creative skill have a dark side? Creative skill is typically viewed as a socially beneficial quality. However, some people use their imaginations in pursuit of antisocial ends. What's, in some cases, described dark creative skill. A scam artist who devises a novel or foolproof scheme for drawing victims is exercising creative skill. But as it is being released to hurt others and help himself and make money from them, or others, most observers will find his scheme objectionable, no matter how imaginative. Recently, scientists have looked for a greater comprehension of how darkness and creative skill relate. Some research studies have realized that creativity is related to narcissism. Others have recognized a link between higher creativeness and lower sincerity and humility. In one research study, dispositional creative skill was found to anticipate unethical conduct. Ultimately, creativeness might be better conceived as neither naturally positive nor naturally negative. Instead, it might be best to examine motivations and results when judging the value of any creative act. Chapter 2. Does creative skill have its dark side? As unrealistic as it may sound, creative skill isn't always a good thing. Psychology has generally considered the think outside the box mindset as more preferable than sticking within the straight and narrow. Decades of research have connected creative skill to a myriad of positive results with flow, the gut feeling of being internally inspired, seen as the key to joy. Historically, the innovative geniuses, such as luminaries as Michelangelo, Mozart, and Picasso, are admired for their brilliant and lasting contributions to the arts. The Henry Fords, Albert Einsteins, Thomas Edison's and Marie Curie's of science permanently changed the way the world runs, with achievements that could only have been produced by the most creative of minds. The psychological analysis of people endowed with creativity with a capital C, the incomparably creative, contrasts their gifts with those whose creativity takes the lowercase form of living a creative life. In contrast to this engaging background, we may therefore wonder why anybody would propose that creativity can have a dark side. The examples of creative skill we tend to recall are those that brought improvements to the world, if not our own everyday lives. We put in a very different category the creative geniuses whose powers were put to damaging use. However, are they in fact exercising the exact same skill? The question of whether there can be a dark side to creativity led University of Nebraska psychologists Daniel Harris and Ronnie Ryder-Palman, 2015, to explore David Cropley's principle of sinister creative skill, or the use of creativity to achieve a damaging goal. Creativeness can be hazardous without being malevolent, according to this view. An innovative person may make a scientific or cultural contribution that has unintentional negative consequences. For instance, 3D plastic printing can be used to create artificial limbs that help people navigate their world more adaptively, or handguns that escape metal detectors. Facebook can be used to promote social interaction and maintain long-distance bonds, or it can be put to the damaging goal of cyberbullying. In both cases, the original product was a true innovation, but it depends on users to identify whether its effects help to enhance life or take it away. In malicious creative skill, the original intent is to cause damage. Sinister creativity is aimed to devastating consequences only, from committing acts of criminal activity or serial murder to terrorism. The malevolently creative try to assault targets, conjure up fear, and assert their power. Additionally, just as creativity can be noteworthy, with a capital C, so can malicious creative skill. It can also, on the other hand, take a daily form in which it's practiced in ordinary scenarios. The malevolently creative attempt to manipulate others to their own ends, create mischief just for the sake of creating mischief, and try to deceive the people closest to them. Harris and Ryder-Palman chose to take on the roots of malevolent creativity in character, specifically by investigating the role of aggression. They are especially fascinated by implicit aggression, or the propensity to justify an aggressive strategy in a given circumstance. Most people who are prone to hostility tend to act out, as you might guess, without really thinking about it. Having said that, if they consider the future consequences of their actions, they are able to better control their aggressive impulses. It's only when they're triggered to act quickly that the truly aggressive reserve their moral decision-making and validate their harmful behaviors. The propensity towards sinister creativity, then, may show a mix of factors from the person, aggressiveness, and the situation that activates the response. As the scientists clearly could not use real-life circumstances to check their theory, they created circumstances intended to invoke malevolent creative skill that cued individuals to experience the negative emotions of hostility, anger, injustice, and a desire for vengeance. The humane creative skill scenarios were meant to stipulate the desire to cooperate, help, and use thought instead of action to acquire a positive result. A sample of 138 undergraduates, 31% male, typical age 25 years old, finished a series of surveys meant to evaluate implied aggressiveness, a tendency towards premeditation, and divergent creativeness, the capability to think of multiple solutions to an issue. The key question was if the propensity towards implied aggression would communicate with premeditation to influence the number of creative ideas that streamed in response to the malevolently creative issue, the one that generated feelings of rage and a desire for revenge. As forecasted, when the researchers presented them with the problem that activated malicious creativity, participants high in implicit aggressiveness and low in premeditation uttered the largest number of malevolently themed options. When presented with the more benign issue that activated pro-social motives of helping others and cooperating, those high in implicit aggressiveness, even if they were high in impulsiveness, were far less damaging in their imagined solutions. The research study's discoveries led the authors to conclude that it was premeditation more than implied aggressiveness that controlled a person's expression of malicious creativeness. Having the ability to hold back on their impulses, to put it simply, can make those primed to be aggressive less hazardous when provoked. There are necessary implications of this laboratory investigation of malicious creativity for daily life. As Harris and writer Paulman point out, poisonous work conditions in which bosses position their staff members under tension, promote competition, and in general are violent and hostile, are more likely to produce staff members who actively try to hurt, outdo, and control each other. Believing that it's fine, if not desirable, to act aggressively, they'll be more likely to come up with aggressive solutions in keeping up their competitive edge. When they perceive that they've been mistreated, they will dream up ways of getting back at their coworkers that, except being overtly aggressive, hurt them in mentally abusive ways. Likewise, we might claim that in the home, sinister creative skill can also accidentally be cultivated amongst sisters or brothers when their parents reinforce hostility and themselves are violent. With the idea of sinister creative skill, we could be better able to comprehend and control an individual's desire to think up imaginative ways to harm others and instead put on the moral brakes. Creativeness can help everyone lead a more fulfilling life, particularly when we recognize its potential dark side. Chapter 3: Creativity and Deception. Creative skill is typically deemed a desirable characteristic. All of us dream we could paint like Van Gogh, compose like Beethoven, or invent like Da Vinci. Plus, if we cannot do it ourselves, we'd at the very least like to be surrounded by people who can. Now, is there a dark side to creativity? New research published in this month's problem of the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology examined this very question. Dr. Ki Michael May of South Korea's SKK Graduate School of Organization led the research. He clarifies the rationale behind the research studies beneath. What truly interested us is the potential negative effect individual creativity can cause, says Mai. Many companies seek to work with the most creative workers and cultivate a climate of innovation. For instance, popular organizations such as Apple, Google, and Facebook rely on the ideas of their employees to attain success. Pixar, the leading innovative leader in the field of computer animation, regularly accepts creative scripts and novella movie ideas from its workers when designing animated films. Specifically, May had an interest in whether climates of development and creativeness might have undesirable consequences, so he developed a series of experiments to check his hypotheses. In one of our research studies, we measured creative skill with an established study, clarified May. We then appointed participants to either a creative task that involved using a set of Lego parts as a product designer to develop a new product or a non-creative job that involved using the same set of Lego parts to follow a specific set of direction as an item tester. Ma and his associates then asked individuals to read a morally unclear circumstance about a supervisor considering a doubtful course of action, and to create as many justifications for this course of action as they could. Finally, individuals played a financial game with a partner in which honest behavior would earn a payment of $5, while deceptive conduct would earn a $15 payout. The results? May and his colleagues learned that the ones who scored higher on the creativity study and who had also taken part in the creative Lego task were more likely to develop more dishonest validations in the theoretical situation. They were also more likely to behave deviously in the financial game to earn a bigger payout. In other words, creative types acted unethically, but only when their creative instincts had been triggered in the Lego task. Consistent with this finding, Mai warns against concluding that creative people always act unethically. Simply presuming that a person who is highly creative will probably be unethical exceeds what we are suggesting, says Mai. We also don't try to claim that creativeness in companies is bad, or that it should be stayed away from. Perhaps a much better way of approaching our discoveries is to recognize that most positive attributes, such as creative skill, can also have some potential drawbacks. By shedding light on this, we want to encourage all the positives connected with creative skill, while informing people about potential issues to recognize and keep from. While this research does not imply that your creative friends and colleagues are always going to behave cunningly, when they do, you know why. Chapter 4. The definition and application of creativity and mortification. You're nervous. You have been writing and modifying this poem for a week. You finally show it to your spouse, and he dismisses it with a curt, meh. You have actually been taking dance lessons for the past month to prepare for your wedding event. A week before the special day, your fiancé crushes you with a casual, I guess some people just can't dance. Or, have you been toiling away getting ready for a work presentation for 3 days? On the big day, your boss rolls her eyes and disrupts the presentation with, does anybody have any good ideas? Creative skill takes bravery. We have to put ourselves out there and risk all kinds of feedback, productive or otherwise. Enhancement requires perseverance. If we are ever going to get better at our craft, we have to keep creating. But sometimes we don't. Innovative suppression and creative mortification can stop us in our tracks and make us give up, either temporarily or permanently. Improv offers us a design for avoiding creative suppression and mortification and for cultivating creative skill. What is creative mortification? Professor and creativeness specialist Ronald Begato specifies and differentiates creative suppression and creative mortification. Innovative suppression is when somebody's creative expression is restrained. This can happen when someone slams you or simply because you have some insecurities. As Begato states, it is momentary and relatively harmless. Creative suppression would be if I volunteered an idea throughout an office brainstorming session. My boss said it was dumb, so I stopped volunteering any more ideas during that specific meeting. Imaginative mortification, not a surprise here, isn't so harmless. It's when a person or something kills your creativeness forever. In a paper released in Psychology of Aesthetics, Creativeness and the Arts, Begato specifies creative mortification as the loss of somebody's desire to go after a specific creative goal following a negative performance outcome. Innovative mortification would be if someone says your art sucks, so you stop pursuing a career in the arts entirely. Or if you stop your job after that conceptualization session because you thought you weren't creative or wise enough to hack it in that particular industry. Nobody is arguing that we should stop giving others feedback entirely for fear of crushing their dreams. Feedback and criticism are essential parts of the creative process. However, I do think creative mortification as a principle, is essential to comprehend if we want to produce more trusting and ingenious learning and workplace, environments where creativity flourishes. The role of shame. Obviously, not everyone is similarly vulnerable to creative mortification. One of Bighetto's research studies set out to measure the relationship between creative mortification and factors like awkward feelings, self-theories of competency, and intellectual risk-taking. Essentially, he was looking at how people's emotions, attitudes, and behaviors impacted their possibility of experiencing creative mortification in the first place. The interesting takeaway is that embarrassment, above all other uncomfortable emotions, was the most substantial factor in somebody experiencing creative mortification. If someone felt embarrassed, they were more likely to throw in the creative towel. Improvisation has a lot to teach us about shame and judgment, and could function as a model for stopping creative mortification in its tracks. 3 ways improvisation kills creative mortification. There are 3 things improv can teach us about preventing creative suppression. 1. Listening. The first way improvisation can be a design for limiting creative suppression and mortification is its enhanced listening. If we want scenes to work out, improvisers can't just memorize lines. They need to truly listen to all the specifics in a scene, to use those details to create more ideas for the scene. What better way to avoid shutting somebody's creative skill down than simply listening to them? Not interrupting, not critiquing or examining, simply listening. 2. Yes, and. The next way improvisation can teach us how to promote creativeness relates to the yes and rule, or the rule of agreement. In improv, scenes are absolutely well improvised. This means that improvisers are better served when they agree with each other's contributions, and after that, add new specifics. Yeah, and. Improvised scenes are created simply because of this sort of contribution and agreement cycle. In a study entitled Improv and Ink, Mary DeMichel clarifies, "In yes, and we're saying yes, I am here, present, listening, and unconditionally accepting what you're offering. And I value your offer so much, I will add to it." There is really no need to be ashamed when your creative thoughts aren't only listened to, but agreed with and executed. Reflect to the examples in the intro. 3. Saving your judgment. This brings us to the 3rd way improvising can teach us to limit creative suppression and mortification. Improvising is all about reducing judgment. Viola Spolin, author of Improvisation for the Theater and developer of the theater games that became Second City Improvising as we know it, writes a lot about the value of improvisers not seeking approval or displeasure from anyone. She was really all about the intrinsic rewards from playing and actually believed that if somebody was waiting for an external thumbs up or thumbs down, they weren't efficiently engaged. Reserving judgment helps improvisers take risks and make big choices. It can also help promote creativity. Convergent and divergent thinking. 2 modes of creativeness are divergent and convergent thinking. Divergent is ideation. It's developing as many ideas as possible. That is improvising, listening, yes and booking judgment. Convergent thinking is evaluating those ideas. Obviously, this is an essential stage. Not all ideas can be the one. In certain creative scenarios, we have to evaluate ideas to see which ones are better than others. But I would argue that divergent and convergent thinking must be kept entirely separate. We should be conscious of our present mode of creativeness and not assess and review when we're supposed to be ideating, and not ideate when we're supposed to be assessing and critiquing. There's no need to evaluate the benefits of your partner's poem. You probably shouldn't review your fiancé's dancing capabilities, like ever. And you should certainly let your staff members voice their ideas. You do not have to enact all those ideas, but there is power in them feeling truly seen and heard. This way, we lower those awkward feelings like embarrassment and shame. We produce space for the delight of ideation and risk-taking. It's so many people's default setting to review and evaluate. I hate this. You could have done this better. I would have done this. Sure, maybe. But is it really time for convergent thinking, or have you beat the gun? If we listened, yes-anded, and reserved judgment more often, we would provoke less embarrassment, which would cause less creative suppression and mortification. We could ideate till there was no more ideas left in the room. Chapter 5. Student Creativeness in the Classroom. How do students learn how to challenge ideas and think beyond the status quo? Can creativity be cultivated in classrooms that follow Common Core requirements and test for conformity? In the beginning glance, these questions may seem at odds. Plus, in fact, many educators actually believe the principle of creativity has been abandoned by today's schools. Yet teachers can and do foster creativeness in standards-based classrooms each and every day. In the past decennium, a new science of creative skill has emerged. Neuroscientists are turning previously held concepts of creativeness on their heads, including the fact that creativeness doesn't include just a single side of the brain. Most researchers agree that creativity must be described by more than the amount of its parts, that include but are not limited to creativity, self-expression, risk-taking, intelligence, autonomy, cooperation, and imagination. The epicenter of exploration and discovery. We depend on our creative capabilities to help us adjust and flourish in increasingly intricate and uncertain times. Researchers also actually believe that a creative life cultivates happiness and well-being, and that there is a considerable connection between creative skill, meaning, and intrinsic motivation. Creative skill is at the epicenter of human exploration and discovery, an ability used to produce and communicate original ideas of value. Influenced by our senses of sight, sound, taste, touch, and odor, creativity is a force that nurtures human development, and an aesthetic gratitude of the world around us. Lots of people associate creativeness with the ones that are gifted and talented. Few would say that Steve Jobs' creativeness helped produce the iPhone and other innovative Apple items. However, creativity is not restricted to people of extraordinary intellect or skill, or to big innovations. Everybody has creative capabilities that evoke originality, like producing a new recipe, communicating an effective idea through self-expression, or finding a better way to attain desired outcomes. We are beginning to learn new and unexpected ways creativity is cultivated at the time of childhood and teenage years. In an exceptional article on the science of creativeness, Diane Kadrigi shares unexpected principles about supporting creativity, including, but not limited to, the idea that memorization is needed to build a student's ability to create original ideas. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, in the systems model of creativity, suggests that skill might be of less significance than encouragement. He cites a wealth of research showing that when grown-ups dedicate energy and time to children's overall development, they also help young people develop creative talents. To cultivate creativeness in classrooms, instructors must comprehend how creativity originates. It is insufficient to give tasks with teacher-perceived creative results in mind. What is most important is to teach the idea, processes, and mindsets of mind related to creativeness that include the expedition of inherently significant ideas as perceived by students. The ideas right below focus on the kinds of procedures and mindsets that spawn creativity. 6 ways to motivate creativity. 1. Try out possibility thinking. Pose the question, what if, in as many ways as possible, helping kids naturally think of creative possibilities. That involves a shift from more conventional approaches that motivate students to ask, why is this and what does it do? Or, what can I do with this? For further specifics on this questioning technique. 2. Supply opportunities to explore individual interests. Invite children to choose individual projects that hold special interest to them. Let me tell you why. Creativity blossoms when children feel rejuvenated by activities they enjoy. An example could be this. If a student likes playing flute, motivate him to write a paper on the history of flute, playing, or the mechanics of flute structure. If a kid likes soccer, supply an opportunity for her to do a creative job after soccer. 3. Develop 5 core attitudes associated with creativeness. Nurture the mindsets of mind that create creative skill. Research by Jane Pirto, recognized professor at Ashland University in Ohio, suggests there are 5 core mindsets of creative people: self-control, openness to experience, risk-taking, tolerance for uncertainty, group trust. In her book, Creativeness for 21st Century Skills, free PDF, she provides certain ways teachers can embed these attitudes in the classroom, and that includes the application of diary-like journals that help students reflect on their thinking to promote creative skill. 4. Engage students in collaborative learning. Encourage students to work together in groups. While creativeness is related to individual skill, we draw inspiration from other people's ideas and from our cultural surroundings. Great inventions and creative developments are most often the result of collaboration between people who have comparable goals, but varied ways of thinking or seeing the world. Innovative procedures are at work when students pool their shared talents to resolve an issue. 5. Practice divergent thinking. Choose a sentence or short paragraph from a class reading task that holds different meaning to different people. Ask students to share several ways the words might be translated by people from varied cultures, ages, or life experiences. The goal of divergent thinking is to create as various ideas about a subject by checking out a multitude of possible options. In his excellent paper on how to motivate divergent thinking, Dr. Daniel Raviv of Florida Atlantic University describes a number of activities that enhance high school students' divergent thinking. Many are proper for younger students. 6. Help students make connections. Give assignments that encourage metaphorical thinking to show complex ideas or resolve a problem. The use of metaphors helps students acquire new insights and challenge assumptions. Students who learn how to connect seemingly unassociated ideas, thoughts, and principles develop the capability to manufacture information in creative ways. Chapter 6. Our Messy Minds. To live, get you started is a choice. You should make a dedication to your own mind and the possibility that you will not be accepted. You have to let go of satisfying people, usually even yourself. Jessica Olian. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, author of Creativity, Flow and the Psychology of Discovery and Development, studied the lives of 91 noteworthy developers, what he terms cancer creatives, who change their domains looking for what they might have in common. His conclusion? If I had to show in one word what makes their personalities different from others, it is intricacy. By intricacy, he meant having characters of contradictory extremes, like being both exceptionally wise and naive, or standard and defiant, or objective and passionate. There is little middle ground. I get you begun complicated people are almost unrealistic to peg as this or that. Their capacity to tap into a fuller range of what life provides is what allows them a broader response to life's issues and questions, whether practical or artistic. This is in line with discoveries that openness to experience is a fundamental part of creative skill. Csikszentmihalyi really believes that we all end up being more creative by purposely becoming more intricate. A creative person is highly individualized. She follows her own star and develops her own career. In the meantime, she's deeply soaked in the customs of the culture. She learns and appreciates the rules of the domain and is responsive to the viewpoints of the field, as long as those opinions do not conflict with personal experience. Complexity is the outcome of the rewarding interaction between these two opposing propensities. Creative skill and social rejection. Complexity, however, is not for the faint of heart. Parents or caregivers, instructors, good friends, and employers are more at ease when we're foreseeable, when we restrict our creative skill to what's comfortable, when we stay free from dispute and controversy. In Inside the Box, people do not actually like creative skill. Jessica Olian writes something about how beginning in school and continuing through the world of work, our civilization regularly discourages, if not outright punishes, creative skill. Yeah, we celebrate eminence and innovation, but we don't value the ways in which creative people think and feel and live. Children are seldom applauded for their divergence. Workers who challenge the status quo are rarely rewarded. Though Olian also writes that not fitting in may be just what we need to live a totally creative life. All this negativity isn't simple to digest, and social rejection can be agonizing in some of the exact same ways physical pain hurts. However, there's a twinkle of hope in all of this rejection. A Cornell research study makes the case that social rejection isn't actually bad for the creative process and can even facilitate it. The study reveals that if you have the slipping suspicion you may not belong, the act of being declined verifies your interpretation. The influence can liberate creative people from the need to fit in and allow them to chase after their interests. The students in my creativity classes are pushed when they learn that the complexity they had always thought of as something to hide or try to simplify, because it is sloppy and hard to comprehend, can actually be an innovative asset. They also start to rethink aspects of their youth that were hard and painful. Adult divorce, bullying, learning impairments, as preparations for them to be more totally themselves, free from the need to fit in, because they already know that they can survive without fitting in. Snatching creativity from the jaws of defeat. In this concept of positive disintegration, a theory of personal development and personality development, Kazimierz Dabrowski presumed, a great flow of creativeness, changing direction, reach, subject, and a level of the creative skill typically follows after great beats in life. Like Csikszentmihalyi, he found in creative people the struggle of contradictory sets of tendencies, an inadaptability to reality, a personality to prospection and memory. He claimed that creativeness is often connected in some individuals with periods of psychological crises, personal struggles, and tough life experiences. It seems to demand turbulence in the inner environment. This isn't to say that we should seek pain and conflict for their own sake, but rather that we can cut ourselves some slack for lives that are imperfect. Our periods of disintegration can function as chances for both creative and personal growth. Dabrowski reasoned that this is specifically true of complex feelings we have about ourselves, and that lifelong creatives often have a consistent belief of inferiority toward themselves. Chapter 7. Uncertainty. Are you somebody who must complete a task, or you somehow don't feel right? If something is too open-ended, or when you are faced with the need to contact creativity and openness to experience, do you find yourself desiring? If so, you might be a person with a higher, really need for closure, NFC than others. Psychologists Webster and Kruglanski, 1994, specify NFC as a stable, dispositional preference for order and predictability, an immediate desire to reach decisions, affective discomfort with ambiguity, and closed-mindedness. Creativity and perfection. Why is it important to comprehend how NFC influences efficiency in diverse environments, most likely both personal and professional? People high in NFC might have a difficult time making decisions, experience psychological dysfunction, and stumble over how info is taken in and used. As Wrońska and co-workers keep in mind in a just recently released study, they discuss performance on convergent and divergent tasks. Convergent tasks are those requiring a single right answer, while divergent tasks need individuals to produce as many possible solutions as they can cook up. Prior research suggests that folks high on NFC have the tendency to be less creative and less consistent on tasks that involve divergent thinking, despite of how challenging or threatening that job is. Sankrinan et al., 2017. On the other hand, low NFC people seem to do better, solve problems more, get you started with tough yet less threatening tasks. Low NFC people were also more likely to continue the face of a difficult but be hindered by anxiety-provoking tasks. High NFC individuals have the benefit of performing regularly despite of how threatening a task feels to them, but do worse overall on tasks needing creativity. For convergent jobs, more certain and defined in scope and result, high NFC people are likely to be more comfortable and may work better to completion. Low NFC people, on the other hand, might lose interest in the lack of adequate difficulty, discouraged by anxiety-provoking elements of the job at hand. With these conversations in mind, Wrońska, Bujach, Goklowska, Reischel, and Nystad created a study to look at person-environment fit, a region of crucial significance in matching people up with optimum workplace. Person-environmental fit is helpful for determining both expectations for functioning difficulties and strengths, and also discovering parts for potential intervention and improvement. Pick people who fit well, or if you don't have that high-end, train them to address areas which clash and adjust the environment to set them up for success, if you can. Individuals whose personalities match their workplace should do better and feel better in their roles. To date, research has not looked at how need for closure identifies an important part of person-environment fit, the fit between the individual and the particular task laid out for them to do. This element of person-environment fit is, as one might expect, called person-task fit. How does the need for closure identify fit with convergent versus divergent tasks? To look at this question, the research team measured NFC for 863 grown-ups from 6 different countries: Austria, Italy, Ireland, Poland, Sweden, and the UK, across 5 different languages, gauging emotions of skills and positive and negative emotional responses for convergent and divergent jobs. Need for closure was measured using the 15-item short need for closure scale, linked to full NFC scale. Efficiency was not directly measured in the study for logistical reasons, but as noted above, it has been revealed to vary with low and high NFC. A stern taskmaster. What jobs did individuals work on? Divergent thinking tasks included generating cartoon captions, conceptualizing different ways to use rubber bands, and finding better ways of designing a table for the ones with impaired vision. The convergent thinking tasks included recognizing differences between 2 different cartoons, reading a passage and then addressing accurate questions about it, and creative directions for how to put together a table. The divergent and convergent jobs were developed to have similar levels of trouble, overlapping thematically while differing in terms of the definition of success. Proficiency and creativeness. There were some significant findings. To start with, results corresponded across different language groups, suggesting that the results have some cross-cultural validity. High NFC participants experienced themselves as more skilled at convergent jobs, while lower NFC folks felt as just as qualified with either kind of task. Participants who felt more positive emotions also experienced themselves as more proficient and vice versa for those reporting negative emotions, an effect significant only for high NFC people. I talked to private investigator Marta Wrońska of the University of Groningen's Department of Personnel Management and Organizational Behavior in the Netherlands. She notes that for high NFC individuals, solving a divergent job caused lower competence than solving a convergent task. This in turn diminished positive emotions and increased negative emotions. Low NFC participants did not really show a relationship between competence and reported emotion, regardless of whether they worked on divergent and convergent tasks. These discoveries are notable because they look at competence and feelings for specific tasks, instead of measures of fit with the workplace in general. This in turn suggests that high NFC people could require more customizing of their environment and task choice to perform efficiently, while low NFC people might be more versatile to varied work settings. This has been Creativity: How Our Messy Minds Can Both Create and Deceive. Written by Carla Weyers. Narrated by Tyler Shandro. Copyright 2020 by Carla Weyers. Production copyright by Carla Weyers. Creativity: The Science and Origin of Creative Ideas. Written by Carla Weyers. Narrated by Tyler Shandro. Chapter 1: Creativeness as an Art. Has this ever happened to you? You're out for a jog, totally relaxed, your mind a pleasant blank. Then suddenly the solution to an issue you've been mulling over for weeks pops into your head. You can't help but wonder why you didn't think of it before. In such moment, you've reached the creative spirit, that evasive muse of good, and in some cases, great ideas. Yet it is more than a periodic insight. When the creative spirit stirs, it animates a design of being, a lifetime filled with the desire to innovate and explore new ways of doing things, to bring imagined reality. That flash of motivation is the final moment of a procedure marked by unique phases. The basic steps in creative problem solving. The first stage is preparation, when you search out any info that may be pertinent. It is when you let your imagination roam free. Being receptive, being able to listen honestly and well, is a crucial skill here. That's much easier said than done. We are used to our ordinary way of thinking about solutions. Psychologists call this functioning fixedness. We see only the apparent way of looking at a problem, the exact same comfortable way we always think of it. Another barrier is self-censorship, that inner guide of judgment that confines our creative spirit within the boundaries of what we deem acceptable. It is the voice that whispers to you, "They'll think I'm absurd," or "That will never ever work." But we can learn how to recognize this voice or judgment and have the courage to discount its devastating advice. Once you have mulled over all the relevant pieces and pushed your reasonable mind to the limitations, you can let the problem simmer. This is the incubation stage, when you absorb all you have gathered. It's a stage when much of what goes on happens outside your concentrated awareness, in the unconscious. As the saying goes, you sleep on it. The unconscious mind is far more fit to creative insight than the mindful mind. Ideas are free to recombine with other ideas in novel patterns and unpredictable associations. It's also the warehouse of everything you know, and that includes things you can't readily call into awareness. Farther, the unconscious speaks with us in ways that exceed words, and that includes the wealthy emotions and deep imagery of the senses. We are more open to insights from the unconscious mind when we aren't thinking of anything in particular. That is the reason why musings are so useful in the quest for creativeness. Any time you can just daydream and unwind works well in the creative process. A shower, long drives, a quiet walk. For example, Nolan Bushnell, the founder of the Atari company, got the inspiration for what became a very popular video game while idly snapping sand on a beach. With luck, immersion and fantasizing result in lighting, when suddenly the answer comes to you just as if it were from absolutely nowhere. This is the well-known stage, the one that generally gets all the glory and attention, the moment that people sweat and long for, the inner feeling. This is it. But the thought alone is still not an imaginative act. The final stage is translation. When you take your insight and transform it into action, it becomes helpful to you and others. Inside creativeness. The horse is here to stay, but the car is only a trend. President of the Michigan Cost Savings Bank advising Henry Ford's attorney not to invest in the Ford Motor Company. Our lives can be filled with creative moment, whatever we do, as long as we're flexible and open to new possibilities, ready to push past routine. The daily expression of creativeness usually takes the form of trying a new method to a familiar issue. Yet half the world still thinks of creativeness as a strange quality that the other half has. A bargain of research suggests, though, that everybody is pretty capable of tapping into his or her creative spirit. We don't just mean getting better ideas. We're talking about a type of general consciousness that causes greater enjoyment of your work and the people in your life, a spirit that can enhance cooperation and communication with others. Lots of us don't see ourselves as being creative, simply because we don't have much of an audience for what we do. As a matter of fact, we focus too much on big C creative skill, the attractive achievements of geniuses, and overlook the ways each of us displays style and imagination in our own lives. We have become narrow in the way we think about creativity, observes Teresa Amabile, a psychologist at Brandeis University. We tend to think of it as a rarefied artists, musicians, poets, but the cook in her kitchen area is showing creativeness when she develops a variation on a recipe. Howard Gardner, a developing psychologist at Harvard, believes that what is really true about cancer creators holds for the rest of us. Every person has certain parts in which she or he has a unique interest, he says. It could be the way they teach a lesson or sell something. After a while, they get to be as good as anyone. There are others, however, for whom just being good at something is insufficient. They want to be creative. So what they do, Gardner explains, is set small obstacles for themselves, like making a meal a little in a different way from the way they have made it until now. This is not going to get you into the encyclopedia. You are not going to change the way cooking will be done in the future. However, you're going beyond the routine and standard, and it gives you a sort of enjoyment that's rather analogous to what the big C creative individuals get. The more you can experience your own creativity, the more self-confidence you get, the greater the likelihood that you will be creative in the future. The idea is to develop the habit of taking notice of your own creativeness. Ultimately, you are going to come to place greater trust in it and instinctively turn to it when you are confronted with problems. The capability to see things in a fresh way is crucial to the creative process, and that capability rests on the willingness to question any and all presumptions. This is personified by Paul MacCready, one of America's most prolific innovators. His best-known achievement is the invention of the Gossamer Condor, the first human-powered aircraft to fly a mile. Says Macready, "To create the Condor, I had to pretend I'd never seen an airplane before. If you have way too much knowledge of what didn't work in the past and what you think can't work, then you just do not try as many things. The Condor needed to be light, and the only way I knew I had the outright minimum weight was if it broke periodically. If it broke about every 25th flight, that was just right. That's the way we designed it. Now, that is a horrible way to make an ordinary aircraft, but it was a very good for this specific car. Breaking wasn't a failure. It was a success." In creative problem solving, an error is an experiment to learn from, valuable information about what to try next. Many people usually cram in their efforts just because they are afraid of making mistakes, which can be embarrassing, even humiliating. But if you take no chances and make no errors, you struggle to learn, not to mention do anything uncommon or innovative. Research suggests that creative people make more errors than their less creative peers. They are less proficient. It's just that they make more attempts than most others. They draw out more ideas, come up with more possibilities, produce more plans. They win some, they lose some. While creativity takes effort, the work goes more efficiently if you take it lightly. Humor greases the wheels of creativity. When you're joking around, you're freer to consider any possibility. After all, you're only kidding. Having a lot of fun helps you deactivate the inner censor that all too rapidly condemns your ideas as ludicrous. This is the reason that in conceptualizing sessions, the personnel rule is that anything goes and no one is enabled to dismiss an idea as too ridiculous. Most people are free to create as many ideas as they can imagine to think of, no matter how wild they appear. In one of those ideas, there is typically the seed that can eventually grow into an innovative solution. Researchers report that when teams of people are interacting on a problem, those groups that laugh most readily and frequently are more creative and efficient than their more ugly and decorous counterparts. Joking around makes great sense. Playfulness is itself a creative state. When creativity is in full fire, people can experience what athletes and performers call the white moment. Everything clicks. Your skills are so flawlessly suited to the obstacle that you seem to blend with it. Every little thing feels harmonious, combined, and uncomplicated. That white moment is what psychologists call flow. In flow, people are at their peak. Circulation can happen in any domain of activity. The one requirement is that your abilities so perfectly match the needs of the moment that all self-consciousness vanishes. If your skills are not up to the difficulty, you experience anxiety. If your skills are too great, you experience boredom. When abilities and obstacles match, then flow is probably to emerge. At that instant, attention is fully focused on the job at hand. One sign of this complete absorption is that time seems to pass much more rapidly, or a lot more gradually. People are so attuned to what they are doing, they ignore any interruptions. Neurological studies of people in flow show that the brain uses up less energy than when they are wrestling with an issue. One reason appears to be that the parts of the brain most relevant for the task at hand are most active, and those that are irrelevant are fairly quiet. By contrast, when one is in a state of anxiety or confusion, there's no such difference in activity levels between parts of the brain. Flow states usually happen in sports, especially amongst the best athletes. In his bio, basketball star Bill Russell defines those moments as one of an almost supernatural intuition. It was almost as if we were playing in slow motion. At the time of those spells, I could almost notice how the next play would develop and the next shot would be taken. Even before the other team brought the ball inbounds, I could feel it so keenly that I would want to yell it to my teammates, "It's coming there!" Except that I knew every little thing would change if I did. While in a flow state, people lose all self-consciousness. The Zen idea of no mind is comparable. A state of complete absorption is what one is doing, says Kenneth Kraft, a Buddhist expert at Lehi University who has spent several years in Japan. In Zen, the word mind is also a symbol for this consciousness of the entire universe itself. As a matter of fact, the mind of the individual and the mind of the universe are regarded eventually as one. So, by clearing oneself of an individual's tinier individual mind, and by losing the extreme self-consciousness, we have the ability to tap into this bigger, more creative mind. The idea of merging with the activity at hand, which is fundamental to flow, is intrinsic to Zen. It's taught in Zen that one performs an action so completely that one loses oneself in the doing of it, Kraft clarifies. A master calligrapher, for instance, is operating in a no-minded way. No-mindedness is not unconsciousness, some sort of unclear spaciness. On the contrary, it is an exact consciousness at the time of which one is undisturbed by the mind's typical distracting inner chatters. Says Kraft, no-mindedness means not to have the mind filled with random thoughts like, does this calligraphy look right? Should that stroke go there or here? It's just doing. Just the stroke. In a profound sense, all of our creative acts show who we're at the moment. In his research study of people who shaped the 20th century with their creative genius, Howard Gardner discovered that though each of them had reached the limitations of their domain, they shared what seems to have been a childish freshness in their technique to their work. I think everyone, whether they are a big C creative individual or a little c, is drawing not just on their knowledge and mastery, but drawing from youth. Creativeness in kids. You have to have a coyote inside you, and you need to get it out. Chuck Jones, the animator who created Wile E. Coyote, on how to draw one. Creativity takes root in childhood. For the child, life is an imaginative experience. The most standard expeditions of a child's world are creative exercises in problem solving. They start a long-lasting process of creating themselves. In this sense, every child reinvents language, walking, love. The kernel of creative skill, says psychologist Teresa Amabile, is there in the infant, the desire and drive to check out, to find out about things, to try things out, to explore different ways of dealing with things and looking at things. As they get older, children begin to produce whole universes of reality in their play. Our experience of creativeness in childhood shapes so much of what we do in adulthood, from work to family life. However, if creativity is a kid's natural state, what happens on the way to adulthood? The mental pressures that prevent a child's creativeness take place early in life. Parents can motivate or suppress the creativity of their children in the home environment and by what they need of schools. Most children in preschool, kindergarten, even the first grade, love remaining in school. They are delighted about checking out and learning. But by the time they are in third or fourth grade, many do not like school, not to mention have any sense of enjoyment in their own creativity. Amabile's research has determined the primary creativeness killers. Monitoring, hovering over kids, making them feel that they're continuously being watched while they are working. Assessment, making children worry about how others judge what they're doing. Kids should be concerned mostly with how gratified they, and not others, are with their accomplishments. Competition, putting kids in a win/lose circumstance where only one person can triumph. A child should be permitted to progress at his own rate. Over-control, telling children precisely how to do things. This leaves kids feeling that any expedition is a time waster. Pressure, establishing grandiose expectations for a kid's efficiency. Training regimes can quickly backfire and wind up instilling an aversion for the subject being taught. Chapter 2: Ways to considerably enhance your creativity. Here are some ways people have used to enhance their creativity immediately. 1. Learn through collaboration. Interest will lead you to creativeness. Andrew Ng, previously of Google and now Baidu, is somebody that does not actually believe development is because of unforeseeable flashes of genius. Rather, he said you can end up being more creative and ingenious methodically. In my own life, I learned that whenever I was not sure what to do next, I would go and learn a lot, read a lot, talk with professionals. I don't know how the human brain works, but it's almost magical. When you read enough or talk with enough experts, when you have enough inputs, new ideas start appearing. Undoubtedly, teaming up with and gaining from others could be just what you need to give your creativeness a boost. 2. Do something you love. Stuck for ideas? Not sure what to do? Your life needs some balance to guarantee your creativeness doesn't suffer. In a letter to his child, Albert Einstein provided a great bit of fatherly insight when addressing his child's interest in playing the piano that applies to losing yourself in the creative process. Do something that pleases you. That is the way to learn the most. That when you are doing something with such enjoyment that you do not notice that the time passes, Einstein wrote. I am in some cases so involved my work that I forget the noon meal. Love and creativeness are intertwined. A hobby like playing an instrument, running, or gathering memorabilia can help you relax and fight stress while giving your creativity an increase. 3. Be sure to find inspiration from other industries. Your next idea won't come from copying what a competitor has already done. So look for development in different industries and niches. Research what services are dominating. Why? What businesses are you most faithful to? Why? How can you move what worked for services outside your market to your own market? Perhaps you can enhance on these ideas. Taking inspiration from other industries is a great way to improve your own creative skill. 4. Disconnect or just do nothing. As Alan Cohen once wrote, there is virtue in work and there is virtue in rest. You should use both and overlook neither. At times, your best ideas will come to you when you are not wrecking your brain attempting to come up with the next great idea. It could be while you're sleeping. A great night of rest will help you be more productive and creative. It could be while your mind wanders in the shower that you get a great idea. Maybe your next ingenious idea will come while you're driving, working out, trekking, shopping, sitting on an airplane, or watching the sunset. If your creative skill is lacking, disconnect. Relax and let your brain do its magic. 5. Walk. The typical individual sits between 7 and 15 hours every day. Crazy, right? That's dreadful for your health and your state of mind, which means it can be terrible for your creativity. Stanford research has suggested that walking enhances creative thinking. In a follow-up research study, HBR learned that people who take part in walking conferences are more creative and engaged. Priceline Group CEO Darren Houston, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg, Western Union Co. CEO Hikmet Eskrek, Twitter co-founder Jack Dorsey, LinkedIn CEO Jeff Weiner, and scores of other company managers and business owners frequently have walking conferences. While walking at the time of work doesn't resolve our national sitting crisis, it is a big step in the right direction. 6. Set the right mood. An absence of ideas or being unable to solve an issue can be exceptionally discouraging. Unless you value complete silence, music can be the thing to give your mood and your creativeness an increase. Steve Jobs used music to change his moods and keep himself creative. It could work for you too. 7. Use the 6 thinking hat strategy. In some cases, you just need to start over. Forget everything and start anew with a blank slate. Break it down using 6 different colored thinking hats. Using this process could help you look at things in a completely different way. It gives you the alternative to look at things in a just the facts way, white hat, where things could fail, black hat, and possibilities, alternatives, and new ideas, green hat, for instance. By taking a look at an issue from special viewpoints might be just what you need to find a solution. 8. Request for guidance or feedback. Sometimes you're too close to a problem to sort out a creative resolution all on your own. Requesting for help isn't a sign of weakness. Request help and advice from good friends, peers, and people from your personal network that you trust and respect. Every person has a unique skill set, experience, and knowledge. A fresh outside perspective, or 3 or 5, may be just what you really need. Even if you don't use their advice, it may trigger some new creative thinking that will get you where you need to go. 9. Pick a terrible idea. Step from whatever idea you are stuck on for some minutes. What's the most useless idea you can imagine? Make a list of the worst ideas you can think up. Now, the real obstacle to stretch your creativeness. What are the best functions of these terrible ideas? Perhaps taking a look at these dreadful ideas will stimulate something creative that you can transfer over to your excellent idea. Chapter 3. Creative block breakers that actually work. The insights in this perkily created, lighthearted, and helpful little volume are at times amusing, usually unexpected. It deserves reading straight through and significant and stickied and individualized by any reader who has ever felt not lazy but gooey in the brain in regards to a specific task. 10 favorite block breakers. 1. Redefine the problem to find it more engaging. Ask yourself something like, what if Winston Churchill was creating this packaging? That will provide an unknown angle and maybe a new perspective. Christian Helms, graphic designer. 2. Dirty your canvas. Put an ink-stained handprint on its blankness so you have something to repair. Deru, artist. 3. Draw blindly for half a minute. You can't slam the results. Give yourself a particular theme. This works for free writing too, and let loose. Without expectation, you can break through to be able to work on your blocked job. Paul Madonna, illustrator and cartoonist. 4. Look at creative block as development. Consider the following. I'm not running out of ideas, just trying to push myself into better ones. Mike McQuaid, graphic designer and illustrator. 5. Fill your head with your view of the problem. Evaluate the notes, then do something else, something mindless and ordinary. Daniel Dennett, professor of philosophy. 6. Search for patterns in your episodes of creative block. Bear in mind when it happens, and you can notice a pattern. Maybe it happens mainly on Mondays. Simon C. Page, graphic designer. 7. Choose a better way to envision your blocks. An example would be the following. Instead of needing to route through an obstructed drain to accomplish flow, consider temperature. I search for what's hot and begin there, even if it could be unassociated to what I really need to be working on. Michael Erard, writer and reporter. 8. Induce a feeling of panic by giving yourself a deadline and mentioning your commitment to other people. Ben Berry, graphic designer at Facebook. If the really word due date triggers your psychic pain, consider making friends with the concept. 9. Come up with many options, not just one. Prompted to list 20 possible next moves, your mind will not stop fretting over finding the one flawless one. Mark Johns, illustrator. 10. Do not browbeat yourself when you're in the necessary, in-between times when most creative skill gets its start. A lot of thinking time is vital, and it happens where you cannot see it. Chapter 4. Where does it originate from? Creativity is a divisive word. For some of us, it is vital, yet for others, it's only an added extra, a sweetener in a larger, more serious life. It is needed in many elements of life, from developing the most recent leading-edge development to dreaming up your next art task. Some say it is part of a route to our joy, yet others see it as a path to shame and vulnerability, and no right-minded person would willingly be exposed to that. But where specifically does creativeness originate from? Let's start with a game. What do you think of when you read the word creativity? Is it playfulness, an escape from daily duty and responsibility? Is it that stroke of genius you would love to claim as your own, except you can't explain how it came to you? So how could you claim it as yours? Is it something reserved for other, more free-spirited people than your hardworking self? Or is it something crucial to who you are and how you engage with life, the vast universe, and every little thing else? Let's settle on a loose definition to work from. Creativeness is the process of making something both novella and beneficial. Rex Jung. Beneficial does not need to mean useful. Beneficial can mean getting to know yourself better, expressing something, or allowing you to access to a particular psychological experience. What are the components of creative skill? Understanding what comprises creativity will help us find its roots. Play is the base component. Play gives us approval to mess things up, to move things without an end goal, or obedience to our prior experience. Kids play maybe because former knowledge or the pressure of acting grown up doesn't yet limit them. But we also know that this is a big part of how they, and so we, learn. Creation is a result of creative skill, an output we judge as valuable or beneficial. But the qualities of desire and openness to the possibility of new or unidentified results are crucial to creative skill. Humor belongs to it too, a determination to tread the fine line between the genius and embarrassment. Creativity is our capability to read our impulses, instincts, and thoughts. Creativity is how we make it reality. Boldness, risk-taking, simpleness, and vulnerability are other qualities needed to feel creative. Where else do we see these qualities of creative skill? All the above are celebrated qualities in progressive business thinking. They are often given the label development, absolutely nothing more than an acceptably developed word for creative skill. Well-rounded people, able to participate in wholesome relationships, also need these qualities. If we want to be intriguing and engaging to our good friends, co-workers, and loved ones, we probably need the humility to display the qualities of creativeness. But most crucially, these qualities have been important, our basic survival. Without creativity, how could we have invented the things that we have needed to survive this long? Take another word for creative skill, problem solving, and we begin to see creativeness as a fundamental quality in us. In fact, look at that way. We value creativity so highly, it is the procedure we use to test the intelligence of other beings. This suggests that we comprehend creative skill as a main quality of being smart, or perhaps what makes us special as human beings. So where does creativeness originate from? Creative skill comes out of the necessity to resolve problems. Creativity comes any time we need to question the guidelines, status quo, and even ourselves. Creativity comes from many sources, and that includes socializing, problem solving, and play. We are creative anytime the rules aren't adequate to attain a preferable outcome. Saying that creative skill only comes when we are relaxed enough to enjoy a little painting, crafts, or art is to diminish it to just being a recreation. It is much more crucial and constant than that. When we realize creativeness exists automatically throughout our days and could be purposely delighted in if we choose to, creativity becomes a basic part of our days. So where does creative skill originate from? Simple. It originates from each of us and our interactions with life, the universe, and every little thing else. Start being creative today. There are a near boundless number of ways to be creative. Start with something you are excited or interested by, something simple. Do a doodle, make a mixtape, or write a 10-minute stream of consciousness. Then maybe carry on to something that requires a bit more resourcefulness, creation, and commitment. And so fulfillment, a stained glass window, a wall mural, or a kinetic sculpture. But always go back to basic things, the creative skill in your everyday. Make a sandwich, tell a joke, or write an email. In all you do, just ask yourself the question, is there another way to do this? Do that and you're being creative and touching this essential quality of being human. Chapter 5. What happens in your brain when you create? Could brain scans have predicted Albert Einstein's theories, the Sistine Chapels, or your newest creative thinking task? Not exactly, but a group of scientists just recently used MRIs and AI to anticipate which people are more creative than others with surprising accuracy. Studying the brain can help us comprehend where creative skill originates from and how to encourage new connections between creative expression and the mind. The science of creative skill is a developing principle. Several brain science studies have changed our grasp of the creative process in just the last 10 years alone. Each new research study discovers a new factor that helps or hinders creative skill in the brain. That's great for the professionals that understand the intricacies of the human brain. But what about the creatives? How should creatives take the most recent creative skill science research and actually use it to the creative process or their creative problem-solving skills? Here's what we really need to know about the science of creative skill. The neuroscience of creative skill. The brain has different lobes or areas that all handle different jobs. And while you can blame that dumb choice you made as a teenager on your frontal lobe, creative thought doesn't have a devoted area of the brain where those innovative ideas originate from. A major concept suggests that creativity occurs with those networks problem-solving together, an idea supported by a group of psychology professionals from Harvard, Yale, and others that used MRIs to forecast a person's creativity level earlier this year. When the scientists compared brain scans to individuals engaging in creative work compared to those that were not attempting an innovative task, the research found more connections between the parts frequently associated with those three networks. For creativity, researchers assume that the big three operate as a team. The default mode network generates ideas, the executive control network assesses them, and the salience network helps to recognize which ideas get passed along to the executive control network, Brenner writes. An individual's creativeness is likely a mix of genetics and experience, but more of the latter. In one part of that exact same research study, scientists used MRIs and AI to anticipate how creative a person is. And if you can forecast someone's level of creative thought, even while not being involved in a creative job, then the idea that some people are more creative than others most likely is more than just an idea. Additional research studies suggest that creative skill is both a result of genes and experience. The latter suggesting that everybody has the potential to end up being more creative and no one does surpass the other. Several studies support the idea that creative skills runs in families. Scientific American even found that creative people tended to have smaller connections between the two hemispheres of the brain, the left brain and right brain, called the corpus callosum, which could help give ideas more time to develop. Still more studies show proof linking an innovative mind with more gray brain matter and higher levels of serotonin. But for every study on the brain's link to creativeness, there is another on how psychology, and not just psychology, helps wire the brain for creative expression. Research studies of kids in particular show that watching somebody else be creative, seeing a fantasy film and disorganized play motivates new insights, analytical thinking, and creative skill. Cultivating creativeness doesn't have to be done solely in childhood, though. Additional studies suggest that practices like making note of new ideas, trying new things, and regularly learning on unfamiliar subjects can help foster creative skill. More research studies explore the connection to getting enough sleep, hanging out outdoors, or holding brainstorming sessions at work as ways to improve creativity. Divergent thinking, or the capability to check out several solutions to an issue, is another way to engage the creative mind. Creativity can be enhanced through play, practice, and experience. Valerie van Mullekom, a scientist focusing on the cognitive ties to the imagination, suggests play, practice, and experience are all things that can boost creative skill. Research studies show that watching someone take part in everyday creativity increases your own creative skill. So she suggests taking a class or holding a conceptualizing session with a group. Additional research studies show that both children that play pretend in imaginary worlds and grown-ups being involved in non-professional acting are more likely to have larger creativities. Additional research studies point to the role of experience in the creative process. Mullekom suggests that the longer creatives take part in their particular art, the more likely you are to come up with creative ideas. How typically have you been blown away by the ideas originating from a preferred photographer, musician, or another artist? Consider just how long Pablo Picasso worked on his craft. Don't let the creativity of an artist with a decade of experience prevent you as a novice. Creative skill isn't enhanced overnight, but original ideas can be cultivated through innovation-boosting practices and work. The science of creative skill suggests some choices can dampen creative thinking, while several things can help boost creative expression. Other elements of everyday life can simultaneously pull those creativeness levels down. While much of the research on creativeness is new, researchers have understood for a little time that stress and time restraints moisten development. Other creativity downers are recognized simply from experience. Many creatives find operating in the exact same place each day decreases creativity. Others mention an absence of sleep, perfectionism, and a fear of failing. Neuroscientist Adam Gazzaley, MD, PhD, suggests that today's sense of always being connected and always having something to do also lessens creativeness. Instead, creatives should welcome dullness and minimize multitasking. This will help idea generation. Creativeness is development without constraints, but the restrictions of scientific research does help us understand where exactly creative skill originates from. Scientists are just beginning to peel back the layers of creative expression. Still, understanding the science of creative skill along with the aspects that encourage and prevent those new ideas can help creatives better understand their own process. Chapter 6. Facts about creativity science has found. Daydreaming, horsing around, aimless roaming, an abrupt, terrible loss. So many things that appear to conjure an automated negative association can actually have an intriguing, undoubtedly, usually positive, influence on our creative skill. As a matter of fact, the more you dig into the inner operations of the creative side of our minds, the more surprises you're likely to uncover. Paging through Wired to Create, Deciphering the Mysteries of the Creative Mind by Scott Barry Kaufman and Carolyn Gregory, the pattern is hard to miss. While much of the mechanics of human creative skill is obvious, meditation, for instance, has long been known to enhance a number of cognitive functions. Much of it is downright counterintuitive. The book offers a broad, digestible survey of the current science about creative thinking, usually connecting it to historical examples and well-known names. At the same time, it paints an image that isn't just informative, but useful. 1. 72% of people have creative insights in the shower. It's not just a cliche. Standing naked beneath a stream of hot water and letting your mind wander benefits your creativeness. In a chapter that explores the links between creative skill and different singular activities, spoiler alert, both fantasizing and walking are urged, Gregory and Kaufman verify a feeling a lot of us have had. Something about the outright seclusion of our morning shower makes an exceptional incubator for ideas. Woody Allen is just one celebrity who promotes the creative advantages of a long, hot shower. But he is far from alone. In a 2014 research study carried out by Kaufman, 72 participants around the globe reported having some sort of new insight in the shower. 2. The introverts are onto something. Solitude is where creativity grows. As efficient as we can be in groups, there's absolutely nothing rather like working and thinking alone. As it turns out, the more creative, imaginative networks of the brain just work better when we're alone. That is when we are able to take part in what neuroscientists call constructive internal reflection, a frame of mind essential to idea generation and creativeness. When the outside world is tuned out, our brains are better at making sure connections, taking shape memories, and processing information. 3. Attempting brand new things makes you more creative. It stands to reason that a desire to explore and try new things would be correlated with creativeness. The Beatles' music notoriously changed when they began dabbling speculative tape loops and new instruments, like the sitar and the mellotron, for instance. Beat authors like Jack Kerouac chronicled real-world experiences while playing fast and loose with literary conventions. As it turns out, there's a major neuroscientific basis for the link between openness to new experience and creative thinking. Exploration is tied to the neurotransmitter dopamine, which also plays a role in motivation and learning, among other things, and helps with mental plasticity and a tendency to explore and engage flexibly with new things, the authors write. Actually, a stack of scientific research examined by Kaufman and Gregory suggests that, in their words, the drive for expedition in its many forms could be the single most important personal factor predicting creative achievement. 4. Trust your instinct. That's how LSD was discovered. The story of how chemist Albert Hofmann discovered LSD and then notoriously started the world's first acid trip is well known amongst those fascinated by medicine and psychedelic culture. However, what's less widely understood is one detail. Hofmann had manufactured LSD-25, one of several chemical combos he had created, a full 5 years before he decided to go back and synthesize it again and continue to try out. Why is this the case? He just had a hunch. This kind of intuition, the form of less than conscious thinking, revered by Steve Jobs, also a fan of LSD by the way, as more powerful than intellect, caused the discovery of a drug that would go on to have a huge impact on music and pop culture. It even stimulated the interest of the CIA, who conducted massive experiments into its mind-altering abilities. The unconscious mind could be a much larger deal than we ever realized. Intuition and the abrupt flashes of insight that sometimes spring from it are of great and still little understood interest to neuroscientists and psychologists. According to the authors, 1992 research published in American Psychology suggests that non-conscious procedures may undoubtedly be much faster and structurally more advanced than our mindful thinking systems. 5. Trauma has hidden creative properties. Frida Kahlo, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, Truman Capote, Robin Williams, Jerry Garcia. Some of the most revered creative minds in contemporary history have one thing in common. They experienced some kind of significant loss or trauma, frequently the death of a parent or another loved one, that had an influence on their creative endeavors. It's no coincidence either. Psychologists call this phenomenon post-traumatic development. In the face of a major loss, our brains often check out new creative outlets as part of the restoring process of our lives, specifically as our viewpoints, concerns, and ways of thinking of things shift around. Post-traumatic growth has been checked out in hundreds of scientific research studies, which includes a 2004 research study in the Journal of Traumatic Tension showing that 70% of survivors experienced some sort of positive psychological change after a distressing experience. 6. Fantasizing is remarkably great for your brain. You wouldn't want to drift too far into your mental happy place at the time of a crucial spending plan meeting. But the act of daydreaming can have all of a sudden positive advantages for your creativeness. While fantasizing about a bouncy castle filled with corgi young puppies, or psychologically reliving your summer holiday season at your desk, may not feel really efficient, there's actually more going on inside that skull of yours when your thoughts roam towards the seemingly mindless. According to the science on fantasizing, these moments provide a sort of mental incubation period that can improve creativity, long-lasting planning, and self-awareness. Psychologists have been studying the idea of positive constructive fantasizing for decades and revealing the different ways in which, as the authors put it, the mind's wandering is important to creativity and imagination. 7. A few of the best concepts are widely ridiculed prior to their revered. History is filled with examples of discoveries and ideas that were initially declined before being accepted as the standard. An example could be this. Galileo was notoriously condemned for sharing astronomical discoveries that contravened Catholic theology at the time. Hungarian physician Ignaz Semmelweis was committed to a ridiculous asylum after losing his job for suggesting, in the 19th century, the extreme idea that infections could be spread by bacteria on physicians' hands in healthcare facilities. In 1600, thinker Giordano Bruno was burned at the stake for the hearsay of proposing that our universe might be unlimited. As it ends up, this resistance to new, non-traditional ideas has mental foundations and indeed continues well into modern times. In 2009, one paper released in Scientometrics examined examples of Nobel Prize-winning ideas and discoveries that were at first resisted by the scientific community, demonstrating a systematic pattern of skepticism directed at paradigm-challenging theories. This trend is no coincidence. Psychologists at Cornell University carried out a study that showed that we have an implied predisposition against less traditional, practical-seeming ideas. This tendency apparently runs deep, as studies going back to the 1950s have revealed people to be prone to complying with well-known viewpoints and perspectives. Research suggests that whatever nonconformist tendency we may have as children are typically pushed out of us by the rote learning and direct guideline utilized in schools, which might counteract our more investigative and creative modes of thinking and learning. In fact, Kaufman and Gregory write, "Instructors have been found to display a clear preference for students who show less creativeness." This has been Creativity, the Science and Origin of Creative Ideas. Written by Carla Weyers. Narrated by Ty Lashandro. Copyright 2020 by Carla Weyers. Production copyright by Carla Weyers. Creativity, the art of innovating and creating new things. Written by Carla Weyers. Narrated by Ty Lashandro. Chapter 1. Creativity in Development. The need for creativity is changing how the work environment is organized and what people do. These changes center on the use and analysis of info, the basis for ideas. A firm's future depends upon how well it acquires, translates, and acts upon information. Today, the spread of infotech, consisting of computers and information bases, is producing a sea of change in the business world. Yet how workers analyze that information is as important as the information itself. Interpretation is, in fact, an innovative act. However, the degree of creativeness is influenced by our feelings, our belief that we can speak without fear of retribution, our feeling of being trusted by others, a confidence in our own intuition. all affect how we react to the information before us. There are many ways in which the creative spirit can find expression in the work environment: developments in management, improvements in circulation techniques, or new ideas for financing a company. Innovative ideas can also be used to enhance the company itself by increasing the effort of workers. One such innovation is the elimination of restrictive job descriptions that put workers in boxes and restrict their efficiency. Another idea is to share all monetary info with all the workers. Removal of standard corporate tricks helps workers to understand the larger reality of the business and motivates them to generate ideas of their own, to minimize expenses and increase revenues. Since creative problem solving needs the psychological commitment of the entire person, the modern-day office must go through essential changes. From the efforts of pioneering firms everywhere in the world, a set of crucial ideas are emerging that can change the psychology of the office. Small is better. Size affects creativeness in the work environment. Bigness, by its very nature, appears antithetical to the effective expression of a person's ideas. The best system for creative work appears to be at the scale of the extended family, where people can learn more about one another. This suggests that big corporations be broken into tinier, semi-autonomous units. An advocate of this method is Jim Collins, a lecturer at Stanford University's Graduate School of Business. As our society has evolved from small companies to large ones, he says, it has suppressed innovation. Of course, there are economies in doing things on a mass scale. But you lose just one thing, that creative tip. Massiveness types conformity. Climbing together, a close-knit team drawing on the specific strengths and skills of each member of the group might be smarter and more efficient than any individual member of that group. Yale psychologist Robert Sternberg calls it group IQ, the sum total of all the talents of each person in the group. When a group is harmonious, the group IQ is great. That positions a premium on a leader who can develop an efficiently working team, a leader who knows the virtues of sharing, trust, and support. The value of partnership is a very hard lesson to learn in civilizations like ours, where the trailblazing lone hero has been idolized, and where the objectives of the individual are so often positioned over those of the group. However, even those working alone can learn the advantages of team effort. Vanquishing negativity. Apart from the structure of a company, the mindsets that pervade its operations can boost or thwart creative skill. One of the secrets is building emotions of trust and respect to the point that people feel protected enough to show new ideas without fear of censure. That is because in the market, imaginative thoughts have monetary value. But an unimaginative, unreceptive attitude destroys chance. Somebody who judges your creative thoughts, who refuses to listen to a new way of thinking, or simply criticizes it, is a creativity killer of the first order. Cynicism and negativity are nemesis of the creative spirit. Valuing intuition. The capacity for making instinctual choices is a fundamental ingredient of creativeness. Intuition is trusting the vision of the unconscious, releasing the awkward control of the thinking mind. It is so frequently opposed in the workplace simply because it cannot be gauged or measured or reasonably warranted. But it has the ring of truth because it is grounded in the capability of the unconscious to organize info into unanticipated new ideas. Operating a new company in the global arena needs ingenious ways of understanding and responding to the needs of people. Business people who know how to listen to their consumers rather than just research study figures and statistics will have a magnificent future. And the ones who are able to make use of their intuition will become natural leaders in this new company environment. Many workers are no longer in search of a job that is just a source of wealth, status, and power, but rather one that, apart from assuring a decent living, offers a sense of meaning and a platform for individual creativeness. Production as an end itself satisfies neither of those desires. But there's a growing space between what many organizations view as their purpose and what a lot of people want in their work. The bigger that gap, the more alienated people feel from their work, and the less of their creative energy is available. If a firm fails to change the environment for its workers, it may find it difficult to get or keep the best people. Anita Roddick, creator and president of the Body Shop International, puts it this way: I do not want our success to be measured only by monetary yardsticks. What I want to be celebrated for is how good we are to our employees and our community. It is a very different bottom line. From The Creative Spirit by Daniel Coleman, Paul Kaufman, and Michael Ray, copyright 1992, Dutton. Understand. So typically we go through our days on automated pilot, but lacking the Zen inner awareness. To a specific degree, we like people and situations to be predictable. We enjoy the habitual and tend to stay away from surprises. Having said that, there is a drawback to regimen. We can easily become repaired in our ways of seeing. Our expectation of how things are supposed to be replaces our capability to perceive. This can range from not seeing the new color or cut of your partner's hair to not seeing a new technique to your work. Here are 2 ideas for refocusing your understandings and deepening your creative capability. Each day, do just one thing different from your normal regime. You may go to bed at a new time, or take a new route to work or school, or eat something you would never imagine eating. If you are feeling more adventurous, strike a conversation with an especially difficult individual. Maybe somebody you really can't stand, and treat this individual in a completely new way. The more pesky the person and entrenched the routine, the more likely you are to shake up your regular way of seeing things. The key isn't to think about how to change things or to ask, what is the best way to change them? But rather to change things for no other reason than just for the sake of it. When we see each day becomes ordinary to us, many people, sights, sounds, and smells seem to disappear from our awareness. They lose their diversity. One way of dealing with this is to create a new pattern, a fresh way of seeing the commonplace. Begin with something as basic as water. The idea is to notice the number of times you are able to contact with it and the extraordinary number of ways it appears in your life, from a hot shower, or the delicate beads of mist on the leaves outside your window, to the ice cubes clinking in your glass. This strategy of taking things out of their common setting and creating a new pattern for them is a way of making the familiar odd and opening them to a fresh and creative technique. Ideas from the Golden Zone. Brain professionals tell us that the brain wave pattern of a pre-adolescent kid in the waking state is rich in theta waves. Those waves are much rarer in adults, happening most frequently during the hypnotic state, a twilight zone bordering on sleep where dreams and reality mix. Hence, a kid's waking consciousness is similar to a mindset grown-ups know mainly at the time of these dreamlike moments as they fall asleep. They may be one reason a child's reality naturally embraces the zany and the bizarre, the silly and the terrifying. A child's waking awareness is more open to fresh perceptions and wild ideas. With adolescence, the kid's brain changes to resemble an adult's. The theta brain waves and the wildly creative flair of the child start to fade. Some, though, continue to tap the richness of the theta states later in life. Thomas Edison put the hypnotic state to work when he was an adult. He had an unusual strategy for doing this. He would doze off in a chair with his arms and hands curtained over the armrests. In each hand he held a ball bearing. Beneath each hand on the floor were 2 pie plates. When he wandered into the state between waking and sleeping, his hands would naturally relax and the ball bearings would drop on the plate. Awakened by the sound, Edison would immediately make notes on any ideas that had come to him. Releasing. When people assess those times when they have been most totally creative and meaningful, they often describe it as a letting go experience. It is at that point that creativeness takes place. It could be in doing energetic exercise or in concentrating on some basic repeated job. It may be just that you are dropping off to sleep in dreams, or just as you are waking up. Many find that they routinely get a helpful insight in the shower. Practicing meditation, stretching, playing an instrument, dancing, these are other ways in which people have of giving up in their own creative skill. The following two approaches can also help move you from being stayed with releasing. Releasing physically. Sit in a chair with your hands resting comfortably on your legs. Tense your legs and keep them tense as you successfully tense your hips, rib cage, shoulders, neck, and jaw. Hold all of that tense for a moment. Now, unwind. You have just let go. How did it feel? Releasing psychologically. Imagine that something you psychologically carry around with you, a strong feeling, belief, or thought that blocks your way, is actually represented by something you are wearing. It can be a shoe, watch, ring, or necktie. Chapter 2. Creativity is more than just coming up with ideas. The European Collective Creativity Conference combined a group of international experts to assemble a puzzle of creativeness, building from neuroscience to cultural influences. During the week at the Webster Center for Creativity and Innovation in Geneva and the Marconi Institute for Creativity in Bologna, the scholars challenged the typical propensity to release creativity with thinking of new ideas. Creativeness is much broader than creating ideas. As described by a very large group of scholars in the Creativity Manifesto and discussed at the conference, most importantly, creativity is action. What does it mean that creative skill is action? It means that creative skill exceeds thinking, as frequently thought by lay people and implicit in the choices of creativity scientists. Creative thinking tasks are the most common denominators in experimental studies, studying many questions from the role of state of mind to the results of multicultural experiences on creativeness, and used research such as testing the success of creativity training programs. Though developers don't stop there, Ludwig van Beethoven didn't only come up with tunes, he also wrote 9 symphonies. Agatha Christie didn't just have an idea for stories about an eccentric Belgian investigator. She facetiously worked on each of 33 Poirot novels. Scientists tend to think there isn't anything more useful than a great theory. So let me take you on a trip of the theoretical definition of what creativity is and how we should study it, through the example of the role of emotions and emotional intelligence in creative skill. Creative skill affects how people associate with themselves, others, and the world. Creativity alters the individual and contributes to their well-being. This could be creativity in how people deal with challenging psychological circumstances can make them more effective in addressing these difficulties. 1. An adolescent who reacts to a school dance being canceled by organizing a protest or organizing a dance in a park is more likely to manage their frustration and disappointment effectively than somebody who responds by letting off steam by punching a bag. Likewise, everyday creative activities predict personal growth. 2. An element of psychological well-being. Creative activity also alters the world. We can quickly think of examples of how the world was changed by great works of art, such as the intro of perspective in Renaissance art or science, penicillin. Perhaps less obviously, creativeness also alters the world through social movements that change society itself. This creativity can pull in formerly left out people, like social movements aiming to develop greater equity in education and the workplace. We cannot talk about creative skill as a general, unified thing. Creativity is not unitary. Rather, we can discover particular aspects of creativity. As researchers developed a design describing the role of feelings in creativeness, 3, we describe what can be learned from the different elements of creativeness. What creative work people chose is predicted by their psychological traits, including their interests and passions. Quick generation of creative ideas is associated with the individual's existing state of mind. Positive and energized moods are advantageous for performance in quick conceptualizing sessions that take 3 to 4 minutes, but these moods cease to be pertinent for creative thinking that takes more than some minutes. Capability to effectively manage emotions ends up being an essential predictor of student creative skill, as ranked by their peers. All those aspects, the choice of what kind of work to pursue, producing ideas, being acknowledged by others, contribute to comprehending creativity, but depend on different characteristics and capabilities. We need to gain from both qualitative and quantitative studies. A current research study at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence shows different lessons from quantitative versus qualitative techniques. We surveyed artists, painters, sculptors, photographers, creative writers, musical artists, and choreographers, and asked about their emotions in the creative process. As in many previous research studies, artists rated positive emotions of interest, curiosity, love, and joy as the most typical in their work. Still, when we asked them to specify emotions appropriate to their work in their own words, a more intricate picture emerged. A professional photographer, for instance, discussed grief, fear, unhappiness, horror, anger, hope, and remembrance. And a choreographer discussed anger, disappointment, hope, and strength as driving their work. Such qualitative descriptions offer vivid pictures of lived creative skill and can enhance our ideas for future quantitative research. Creative skill is relational. Creative skill does not happen in a social vacuum. We realize that emotional intelligence isn't related to standards tests of creativity. Simply put, being able to properly perceive emotions, comprehend causes and effects of emotions, and manage feelings doesn't anticipate creativity of ideas on tasks, requesting for different uses, for a brick or a tin can. 6. This makes a lot of sense. Being more reliable in thinking of feelings does not help on jobs devoid of emotion and outside of any social context. Though in daily life many issues aren't without feeling, and creativeness is expressed in the social context. When we study creative skill in everyday life, emotional intelligence abilities to effectively manage feelings are relevant. 5. In one study, we defined creativeness in a relational way, as observed in behavior by those in a person's immediate environment. We asked high school students who their most creative peers were, and we also asked their instructors to show students who were most persistent and enthusiastic about their interests. The research study showed that students' capability to manage feelings forecasted their perseverance and passion, which in turn was connected to observed creativeness. This was the strongest among students who were predisposed for creativity. Creativity consists of mental, behavioral, and cultural aspects. It comes naturally to think of creativity as a psychological phenomenon. It includes thinking, character, motivation, and emotion. We know that developers tend to be open to new experiences. They are curious, flexible, imaginative, and that they tend to be inspired by enjoyment and difficulty in what they do, intrinsic motivation, and that they can think broadly to search for ideas and also narrow those ideas down to effectively pick the best ones. Creative skill without action stays in the world of imagination and dreams. Actions bring ideas to life as performances, narrating at an open mic event, playing music with a person's band, or items, writing an essay for school or writing a scientific paper, building an app to provide food from local dining establishments, sawing a vintage-inspired dress. Successful creative action will depend on how we regulate the many ups and downs of the creative process. Finally, creativity is cultural and bound by history. As the conference met at the Marconi Institute near Bologna, Italy, where Giulio Marconi made his first cordless transmittal, we were reminded that in the late 19th century, this was cutting-edge technology. Today, the cutting-edge technologies might pertain to AI. In the United States, we tend to celebrate disruptive creativity, but that is not a universal ideal. In Japan, for example, systematic incremental enhancements are valued instead of disruptive creativeness. To comprehend creativity, we really need to learn about mental, behavioral, and cultural elements that impact the process from approaching problems to creating ideas, selecting ideas, and maintaining effort to realizing ideas. Chapter 3. Ways to be more creative. You might think of creativity as something creative advertisers or copywriters whip out when they need to come up with a compelling advertisement, or a personal trait only certain people, like effective serial business owners or dazzling improv actors, naturally possess. Though, according to Keith Sawyer, research psychologist and author of Zigzag, The Surprising Path to Greater Creativity, everyone can be more creative just by taking 8 incremental steps, but not necessarily in direct order. His path to creativity is more backward and forward, a process in which the steps to greater creativity and creativity build on and feed off each other. The book is a gem, chock-loaded with interesting discoveries from research studies and a deep well of techniques that will get you thinking differently. As a matter of fact, Sawyer advocates what's likely a radical shift in state of mind for the majority of people. Coming up with good ideas isn't something we leave till there's a pressing need. Rather, it's an ability that can be practiced daily to solve life's problems and discover its chances. Here are his steps for cultivating creativity, together with the tasting of ideas, that can help you along the way. 1. Ask the right question. Sawyer tells the stories of the beginnings of Starbucks and Instagram. Neither company would be what it is today if its founders had continued to try to resolve the original questions they tried to answer. Instead of asking, how can I recreate the Italian espresso bar in the United States? Howard Schultz ultimately looked at what was not working with that idea to instead ask, how can I create a comfortable, relaxing environment to enjoy great coffee? And while Kevin Systrom originally contemplated how he would produce a great location sharing app, a much better question ended up being, how can we produce a simple photo sharing app? Sawyer offers plentiful techniques for producing a ton of questions. Rapidly, without overthinking it, write 10 variations of the same question. This is an example. For the classic question, how can I build a much better mousetrap? You could ask questions like, how do I get the mice out of my house? And what does a mouse want? Or, how can I make my yard more attractive to a mouse than my house? One of your new questions will probably be a better one than your original. Debug your life. Extremely criticize an imperfect item or circumstance you are available in contact with every day. When you have a list, think of ways to eliminate the annoyances. This can amp creativity because little problems are often symptoms of larger ones. Steve Jobs, a genius innovator, excelled at finding bugs that distracted from a user's experience of a product. Make something, then reinterpret it. In some cases, before you get at the right question, you need to make something. And when you do, think of your creation being used for purposes besides your original intent. This process gets rid of your first assumptions, requiring you to consider new viewpoints. 2. End up being an expert. The secret to extraordinary success doesn't lie in natural capability, but in intentional practice. Actually, research suggests that being world-class at anything needs 10,000 hours of practice. It's not just doing the exact same thing over and over again, though. It ought to include pushing yourself to master jobs, just partially, past your abilities. You need to become an expert in a part before you can be creative in it. Effective developers don't just like knowledge. They thirst for it. They cannot stop asking questions, and they always surpass what they've gained from instructors and books, Sawyer writes. There are a plethora of techniques to do this. Listen to TED Talks. They're free videos of motivating, amusing, or fascinating speeches made by brilliant people. To get started, check out 6 TED Talks every entrepreneur must watch. Use all your senses to thoroughly delve into a subject. Let's say you want to find out about the town of Mistras, Greece. You could learn some of the Greek language, search for images of the Peloponnese online, cook some of its standard food, watch videos of its traditional celebrations, stream its regional radio, and email an innkeeper there to get expert information about what the town is really like. Get a coach. Almost all Nobel Prize winners have them. 3. Be open and mindful. Creative people are always on the lookout for possible solutions. You can do this by becoming more mindful and practicing mindfulness, which includes intentionally seeing things and not pegging people you meet based on your expectations or the classifications you have developed in your minds. Rather, try to be open and curious and resist stereotyping people. Create your own luck. Researchers have found people who describe themselves as lucky tend to see things more than self-directed, unlucky people. They also act upon unanticipated opportunities and network well with others just because they're curious. Unlucky people have the tendency to be tense and so concentrated on narrow goals that they miss chances. Don't let mishaps irritate you. Lots of inventions, like penicillin, the slinky and chewing gum, came into being just because a person didn't brush past a mishap, but studied it instead. Having fun with kids' toys, playing children, are really proficient at making new connections. I'm not the least bit uncomfortable about my toy collection, Sawyer writes. If you walk into practically any super creative company, you will find toys all over the place. 4. Play and pretend. When you play, your mind can wander and your subconscious has time to work. This is why time off from work is needed for creativeness to blossom. Explore the future. Imagine yourself hugely successful 5 years from now. Make a note of as many details about what this success looks like. Then write the history of how you arrived, asking yourself questions such as, what was the first step you required to approach your goal? Or, what was one early barrier and how did you move past it? Leave something undone. If at the end of the day you leave a job slightly unfinished, it might be much easier to begin on the next day. That's because cognitive threads are left hanging in your mind, and as you go about your non-work activities, your subconscious mind might hook on them and give you a sudden insight. End up being a novice. Learn how to do something new, such as hula hooping, balancing, carving wood, or archery. 5. Produce tons of ideas. This is the part where you come up with ideas, and lots of them. List uncommon uses for typical family items. What are a ton of different ways you could use a paperclip, brick, or knife? Give yourself 5 minutes to come up with a long list. Don't worry about whether your ideas are silly or not. Try toppling. This is where you use free association to keep generating new words. The trick, though, is to use a different kind of connection between each one. For example, if you start with carrot, you cannot release associate another veggie. Instead, you may select stick as an expression, carrot and a stick. Then glue, because you are thinking of a glue stick. Another example, rock, may cause scotch because you drink it on the rocks. Set an idea time. Block out a regular time when you're sharp, relaxed, and undistracted. Julia Cameron, author of well-known self-help book, The Artist's Way, suggests taking half an hour each morning to free write in a journal. As you do, you'll see new ideas creeping in. 6. Fuse ideas. This includes integrating things that don't usually go together. In a current study, British neuroscientist Paul Howard-Jones asked people to create stories by providing only 3 words. To one set of people, the words related such as brush, teeth, and shine. Another set of people received unrelated words such as cow, zip, and star. The people who got the unrelated words made up more creative stories. Make remote associations. Go to page 56 in 2 different books and find the 5th sentence on each. Now develop a story that tells the connection between the two. Use example. You should find resemblance between 2 things that on the surface appear different. Make sure you find something that is removed from your issue. Then define 5 structural properties of it. Rather than noting sharp or metal for a knife, for instance, you want to determine things like requires down pressure to cut. How can these attributes really apply to whatever you're trying to solve? Engage with people who are different from you. We socialize with people who are a lot like us, and while doing so may be comforting, it is not stretching. Also try imagining yourself as someone else, like a chef, a foreign student, a building inspector. How would such people see the world? 7. Choose the best ideas. If you followed the first steps, you should have lots of ideas. Now the trick is choosing the best ones. Know what you're searching for. To do that, you really need to trust your intuition. The sense that an idea has prettiness. Sawyer also recommends going with ideas that are easy, classy, and robust. The latter referring to a design that will keep working under adversity, or if used incorrectly. Make ideas contend against each other. Select 2 of them and define how they are different, even in the most subtle ways. Or if you have more than 50 ideas, write every one on a sticky note or index card. Move ideas that seem associated close together. You'll come to idea clusters and look at fascinating differences between ideas. Maybe they all differ along the same measurement. Look past the good. Once you have decided an idea is a good one, recognize its advantages and disadvantages. Designate each one a number between 1 and 10, according to how crucial it is. The professional total needs to be substantially higher than your tally for cons. You should also think of the worst case scenario. What dreadful things might happen to hinder the success of your idea? Never stop editing. Every little thing can always be made better. Find a devil's advocate to come up with a bunch of reasons why your idea is a bad one. Or ask people you trust, will be truthful with you, to look seriously at your idea. And even failed ideas can be repurposed. The Post-it, Sawyer points out, was the outcome of an adhesive that didn't work very well. 8. Make something out of your great ideas. Sawyer holds up the Silicon Valley design firm IDEO for its use of design thinking, which seeks to get easy variations of an idea into the world as early as possible, maybe in an hour or a day, by utilizing basic materials like clay or cardboard to give shape to a new concept. It is a way of thinking through making, a process that typically leads to more ideas. Draw a picture. Even if you think you can't draw, you can at least doodle, and nobody ever needs to see what you put to paper. Abstract issues such as your relationship with a person or a squashing workload advantage most from turning them into sketches. Cartooning with exaggerated shapes or using basic symbols helps. Make a collage. Get a stack of publications and search for pictures and ads. Clip any that connect to your problem in any way and glue them to a pretty large piece of poster board. Keep this art near your desk where you can contemplate it. You could get a new perspective on your problem. Build something. Legos, Tinker Toys, an erector set. Modeling clay, ridiculous putty, and Play-Doh are all good materials you can use to build your idea. Sawyer himself keeps a bag of Legos in his briefcase for times when he has absolutely nothing to do. Chapter 4. Inspiration for Creation. Ominous projections hypothesize that innovative innovations will change many occupational opportunities. To fight this looming disaster, creativity is being hailed as the skill of the future. Human beings who conceptualize different alternatives to resolve problems in original ways will probably stand out and flourish. What is creativity? Understanding the rapidly evolving field of creative skill is complex, but a standard understanding can offer a framework to scaffold creative procedures within ourselves and our kids. Usually defined as the ability to develop novella and useful ideas, creativeness impresses and thrills us. From Leonardo da Vinci's prolific constructions to Albert Einstein's theoretical propositions, we admire humans who develop unusual ideas that move the world. But how do we go beyond what we already know to generate ideas that are both innovative and helpful? Mechanisms of creative skill. Some parts have been identified as important for the development of creativity. Knowledge, a very big and highly developed general knowledge base. Creative thinking, the ability to see ideas and situations in a new way. Adventurous personalities, the desire to seek new experiences, take chances, and endure unpredictability. Creative environment, an encouraging atmosphere that triggers and motivates imagination. Intrinsic inspiration, being internally driven by obstacle and intrinsic interest. The last component listed, intrinsic inspiration, is usually misunderstood. Employers, parents, instructors, and coaches inadvertently undermine natural drive by using behavior techniques that work in the short term to get behavior change. These ostensibly reliable techniques deteriorate creative skill in the long run. Behavioral structures. Operant conditioning concepts, specifically reinforcement and penalty, uncovered by Edward Thorndike and expanded upon by B.F. Skinner in the first half of the 20th century, had profound results en route we conceptualize human and animal conduct. Reinforcement increases the possibility of a particular behavior persisting and includes both administering positive stimuli, i.e. cash, or eliminating negative stimuli, or chores. Punishment is any stimulus applied to decrease a certain behavior. A stimulus might be added, example, verbal reprimand, or eliminated, meaning iPad. Operant conditioning encourages behavior through external means. These methods are highly effective and prosper at behavior modification in a plethora of environments across species. Psychologists, educators, and employers hailed the successes of behavior techniques for decades. But questions arose concerning their results on long-lasting inspiration and creativity. Why didn't we gain from the monkeys? In 1949, primate psychologist Harry Harlow and his co-workers were studying the behavior of rhesus monkeys. One day, in preparation for an approaching experiment on learning, the scientists put puzzles into the cages with the monkeys. The puzzles required 3 steps to resolve: taking out the pin, undoing the hook, lifting the hinged cover. To the surprise of the primate researchers, without reinforcements or punishments, the monkeys started having fun with, and obviously enjoying the puzzles. And then the monkeys became skilled at solving the puzzles without operant conditioning. The monkeys' conduct astonished Harlow and his co-workers. Most psychologists at the time actually believed that there were only 2 chauffeurs of behavior: biological drives, food, water, and sex; reinforcements and penalties. Neither of these drives caused the monkeys unprompted puzzle solving. So what was going on? The scientists concluded the monkeys found the puzzle solving naturally satisfying. According to Harlow, the monkeys were driven by something internal, which is identified intrinsic reward, later intrinsic inspiration. What happened next was a lot more surprising. Harlow decided to offer an external benefit, raisins for puzzle solving. He assumed the concrete benefit would improve job efficiency. Though the extrinsic reinforcers didn't enhance puzzle performance. Actually, the raisin-receiving monkeys made more mistakes and fixed the puzzles less frequently. Harlow came to grips with his results. They contrasted the prevailing behavior zeitgeist at that time. Instead of fighting the behavioral establishment, Harlow shifted to studying maternal contact comforts in monkeys. Self-determination theory. 20 years later, Edward Deci picked up where Harlow left off. He reproduced Harlow's ideas within college students by demonstrating that concrete financial incentives reduced long-term inspiration to complete a project. Deci went on to produce an abundant body of work in the field of motivation. He and Richard Ryan later extended the work and developed self-determination theory as a way to comprehend the three primary universal intrinsic needs: competence, the reason for proficiency; autonomy, the reason to experience free will and volition; mental relatedness, the reason to feel connected with others. These conditions cultivate high-quality inspiration and increased engagement, intrinsic inspiration, and creative skill. Popular experimental psychologist Beth Hennessy started her profession as a primary school instructor. She ended up being intrigued by why she was seeing decreases in inspiration and creativity within her students as they moved from kindergarten to second grade. She left her job as a teacher to attend graduate school. After decades of research, she specified the following about the relationship between motivation and creativity. For many years, my associates and I have found that intrinsic motivation, the motivation to engage in an activity out of large interest in and excitement about a job, is necessary for creativity and extrinsic inspiration, inspiration driven by somebody or something outside the job itself, is almost always harmful. These are effective words. According to numerous research studies performed by Hennessy and other researchers in this field of study, across any ages and walks of life, Hennessy and her colleagues found 6 specific intrinsic motivation killers that by extension kill creativeness: expected reward, expected examination, limited choice, limited time, security, competition. This list needs to make tons of us stop briefly, as the inspirational killers are frequently used methods within schools and spots of work. Chapter 5. The difference between passion and creative skill. Scholars studying the role of feelings in creativeness and development gathered recently at the Centro Botin in Santander, Spain, to send a message that creative skill is not practically thinking, but centrally includes emotions. Feelings motivate and sustain creativeness, such as when an artist portrays the piece they experienced on a quiet winter day, when a scientist is annoyed by a disparity in research findings, or when a business owner is driven by the disappointment of shopping to produce a grocery delivery company. Crucially, there isn't one feeling distinctively advantageous for creative skill. The secret is in how we use the enjoyable and undesirable experiences towards creativity. The role of emotions in creativeness. Conventional research on creative skill and emotion used quick speculative studies. Most people would be brought into the lab, a state of mind created, or in other words, by listening to music, and they would be given a 3-minute creativity task, like creating ideas for different ways to use a brick. Reliably, this research revealed that happy, enjoyable, and stimulated moods were beneficial for creativity. The problem is that creativeness is more than creating ideas simply put bursts, in reaction to issues another person developed, and in relation to problems for which an individual doesn't have an interest. Real-life creativeness is the opposite. Developers are passionate about their work. They spend a lot of time on it, and they develop issues and find chances for creation themselves. If we have an interest in creativity in the real world, we really need to find out about it from real-life appropriate research. The difficulty of creativity is that of finding chances, something that can be changed, creating ideas for possible developments, and changing ideas into products. As the conference happened in Spain, an apt example is the usage of grapes. We could have ideas that grapes can become red wine, vinegar, raisins, or maintains. But having these ideas is different from creating white wine, vinegar, raisins, or maintains. The idea of an innovative white wine isn't the exact same as bringing it into existence. Much creativeness happens during the process of actualizing ideas. How would the red wine be created? Would it be a mix of grapes, and which ones? How would it be aged? The list of factors affecting the creativeness of the item, flavor of red wine, is long and complex. The difference between creative ideas and creative work, transforming ideas into products, developments, performances, stresses the range of emotions in the creative process. I just recently conducted a study of artists, painters, carvers, choreographers, authors, writers, about emotions in their creative process. The dominant feelings they described as motivation for their work were enjoyable, such as love, joy, and joy. But they also pointed out sadness, which is an unpleasant emotion, and also fond memories, which emotion scholars consider a combined emotion made up of fondness and melancholy. In contrast, when describing emotions at the time of the everyday work of creating and changing ideas into items, whether narratives, paintings, or choreographies, the artist most plainly mentioned frustration. By definition, creative skill is hard. There are barriers when doing something original, and negative reviews. All of this is important to creativeness. Naturally, creative skill doesn't exist just in the arts. What about feelings and work more generally? In a study of near to 15,000 people across all industries in the U.S., we compared people who are not creative at work and the ones who are highly creative at work. Those who aren't creative primarily pointed out feeling stressed, tired, bored, angry, and overwhelmed at work. When undesirable emotions become full-blown burnout and dread, creativity undoubtedly suffers. People who are highly creative mentioned being more than happy, but disappointment and tension were also popular. Passion fuels creativeness. A crucial psychological resource for creative work is passion. We tend to think of passion as positive, pleasant, and energized, but it is actually more complicated. Dr. Julia Moeller, University of Leipzig, Germany, reviewed models of passion across character, social development, and sports psychology, and recognized 4 major components. First, enthusiasm involves a strong desire, a pushing desire for an activity. That is studying creativeness. Apart from this, it includes having goals related to the activity. That is, I'll continue studying creativity and write about it in the future. Building an identity around the activity. Or, I don't just study creativeness, I'm an imagination researcher. And perseverance in the face of challenges. That is, I'm going to keep trying to publish my work, even after rejections. Individuals passionate for their work, whether they're researchers, poets, entrepreneurs, operations managers, or something else, are able to use the energy managed by their enthusiasm as an incentive of their work. It isn't the case that they will always be happy or gratified, but their desire and dedication will enable them to have a long-lasting view of work that eventually makes it possible to resolve the tension and aggravation and keep the long-lasting objectives in mind. Highly passionate individuals specify a lot of positive emotions at work. They feel interested, positive, proud, and happy. However, they are no strangers to feelings of disappointment, stress, and tension either. Some level of tension includes passion and creative work. Enthusiasm, with all its emotional strength and intricacy, predicts creativity and innovation at work, past the overall experience of positive emotions, job satisfaction, and engagement. What do we need to learn about emotions and creativity? As scientists, we may have been asking the wrong question. Instead of what emotions benefit creativity, we need to comprehend how we use and manage the diverse feelings we have. We could use undesirable feelings to inform positive feedback, or tap into psychological memories to evaluate and reevaluate what we are creating. In particular, managing emotions, using personal methods and social support, helps us to maintain effort, persist in the face of challenges, and support passion for work. Because of that, this enables us to complete the change of ideas into items, or performances or developments. Personal strategies can include taking a break from the work to get some distance, reappraising circumstances, and finding silver linings or lessons in challenges we face. adapting our goals, or changing our technique, and many others. Importantly, the success of how we manage emotions will not only depend on our own abilities or actions, but also on those around us. If you aren't acknowledged, or worse, if you're actively disrespected, it is inadequate to be competent. Individual creativeness and development will depend also on emotional proficiencies of our managers and leaders, whether they see people who are dissatisfied at work, the extent to which they help employees carry that frustration into creating reliable change, the level to which they understand and have an interest in how their choices impact others, and their support to staff members to manage tough emotions at work. This has been Creativity, the Art of Innovating and Creating New Things. Written by Carla Weyers. Narrated by Tyler Shandro. Copyright 2020 by Carla Weyers. Production copyright by Carla Weyers.